Welcome to Nazir Fears, where your darkest nightmares come to life. This Halloween, get ready for thrilling true stories that will leave you questioning what's real and what's just a horrifying whisper in the dark. From poisoned candy and haunted houses to a disappearance that defies all logic, these are the stories you won't forget. If you dare to face the terror, hit that like button, subscribe, share, and make sure you click the bell, because what happens next might just haunt you forever. Are you ready to dive into the unknown? Let's go. The Haunted House That Trapped a Family, 2006 Introduction. The Via family had always dreamed of a peaceful life in the suburbs. They were a typical middle-class family. David, the father, was an architect. Emma, the mother, worked as a teacher. And their two children, Anna and Ben, had grown up in a cozy little home with a yard to play in. They'd been looking for a fresh start, and when they found an old Victorian house on the outskirts of Houston, Texas, it seemed like the perfect opportunity. The house, with its tall wrought iron gate and large stately windows, was everything they'd ever wanted. It was affordable, spacious, and tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. What could go wrong? But what the Via family didn't know was that the house was hiding a dark secret, one that would slowly consume them, both physically and mentally. Halloween was approaching, and they had no idea that their first Halloween in the house would turn into a nightmare that they would never escape. The first night. It was the first night the family spent in the house. The movers had just left and the boxes were stacked high in every room. The kids had already chosen their rooms, and the air was filled with excitement and anticipation. They decided to celebrate their new home by decorating the house for Halloween. As they went about placing decorations and setting up jack-o'-lanterns, Emma noticed something strange. The house was unnervingly quiet, too quiet. In the old house, there was a distinct feeling in the air, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. The old wooden floors creaked in places that didn't make sense, and there were soft, muffled whispers that seemed to come from the walls. Emma brushed it off as the house settling. After all, old houses had their quirks, right? Later that evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Emma and David sat on the couch, sipping wine and talking about their new life. They had both heard the whispers too, low, almost imperceptible voices that carried through the house. Emma thought it was just the wind, but David wasn't so sure. He felt a chill in the air, though the furnace had been running all day. Suddenly the sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway. They both froze. It wasn't the kids. The footsteps were too heavy, too deliberate. They exchanged a glance, their faces pale. They had no pets, and the house was supposed to be empty. It was then that Emma felt a sharp coldness sweep over her, and she realized that something in this house was not right. Strange events begin. The next few days were strange, to say the least. At first, it was little things, furniture being moved around when no one was near it, lights flickering at odd hours, and items disappearing only to reappear in odd places. The kids, too, had started acting strange. Anna, the youngest, began having vivid nightmares, waking up screaming in the middle of the night, convinced that something was watching her from the closet. Ben, her older brother, claimed he saw figures in the shadows, figures that weren't there when he looked again. He told his parents about seeing a man in the corner of his room, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, watching him with hollow eyes. Emma and David tried to reassure the children that it was just their imagination, but deep down they were beginning to wonder if something more sinister was going on. Halloween night arrived, and the house was filled with anticipation. Emma and David decided to host a small party for their neighbors. The kids were dressed up in their costumes, excited to go trick-or-treating. But there was a strange air in the house as the evening progressed, a heaviness that seemed to press down on everyone's shoulders. Around midnight, when the last of the guests had left, the family gathered in the living room. That's when the real terror began. The haunting intensifies. At first, it was just small things. Emma heard the unmistakable sound of a child crying in the basement. When she investigated, the crying stopped, and the basement was completely empty. David went to check on the kids, and when he opened their bedroom door, he found them huddled together, eyes wide with fear. They claimed that something had been scratching at their windows. The air was thick with dread. Suddenly, the temperature in the house dropped sharply. Emma wrapped herself in a blanket and sat down, trying to calm her shaking hands. She tried to reassure her family, but she could barely hold herself together. Then, the whispers returned, louder now, and they were coming from every corner of the house. The walls groaned as if the house itself was alive, and the floorboards trembled beneath their feet. The lights flickered, and for a brief moment, the family saw what had been haunting them. Shadows moved in the corners of the room, twisting and contorting into grotesque forms. David's heart raced as he watched in horror, the shadows seeming to reach out for them. The temperature plummeted further, and suddenly, an unseen force slammed the door shut. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening now. They were no longer whispers. They were voices demanding something. The house, it seemed, wanted to claim them, uncovering the history. The next day, Emma couldn't take it anymore. She decided to investigate the house's history, hoping to find some answers. She went to the local library, where an old historian shared the dark tale of the property. The house had once belonged to a wealthy family that had disappeared without a trace over 100 years ago. Rumor had it that they had dabbled in dark rituals, trying to summon something from beyond the grave. The house had been abandoned for decades after the family's disappearance, and many believed it was cursed. There were whispers that the spirits of those who had died there were trapped, unable to move on. They were bound to the house, tormenting anyone who dared to live there. The historian spoke of the strange happenings around Halloween, the shadows, the whispers, the spirits that were said to awaken at night. The family's tragic end was never solved, and the house had stood as a silent monument to the terror they had lived through, escape and aftermath. As the days passed, the family became increasingly terrified. The haunting didn't stop. The shadows grew more aggressive, and the whispers turned into screams. Emma and David tried to leave, but it was as if the house wouldn't let them go. Every time they tried to pack their things, something would happen. Furniture would shift, doors would slam shut, and they'd find themselves back in the same spot they started. On Halloween night of the following year, Emma and David decided to leave the house once and for all. But as they walked out the front door with their children, they heard something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The sound of a baby crying coming from the attic. No one had been up there since they moved in. They never returned to the house. The Via family fled, leaving everything behind. The house stood empty once again, its windows dark and its door locked. The eerie whispers, the shadows, and the cold chill that had plagued them for so long faded, but the house remained, waiting for the next family to step inside.